Hey, hello. We are going to talk about today something we've talked about in other videos, but apparently, the stupid keeps saying stupid shit. With the recent spate of religious lunatics trying to push religious ideations into state functions. We're going to have to go back over this again. We have Oklahoma. They want to teach from the Bible. So, are you going to teach about the bears eating kids? Or was it Noah getting or Jonah getting swallowed by a whale? What parts are we going to teach? What parts are we going to teach? Hmm? Or are you going to perhaps teach the more hateful parts, like from Leviticus? I'm assuming that's what you want to teach, because usually that's what you often hear conservatives draw from. Anything that allows them to hate upon others. Even if there's other parts in the book that show how stupid such ideation is, they're still like, no, this shows. I'm like, you're picking and choosing. You're not looking at it as a whole. But, you need to stone people who were homosexual, despite the fact that Jesus would still treat them kindly and, happily talk with them, be friends with them, walk with them. He's like, show kindness, turn the other cheek. Violence is rarely the answer. So again, it's the hypocrisy, the stupidity. But yeah, Oklahoma demands that schools are required to teach from the Bible. Louisiana feels the Ten Commandments should be displayed in the classrooms. Well, you can have no more idols before the Lord, so forget Pledge of Allegiance. But, whatever. Anyway, yeah, there is a reason we have this right here. Separation of church and state. While the Constitution does not explicitly say separation of church and state, that is what is inferred in the First Amendment. Jefferson has even pointed this out, saying there must be a separation of church from state. Talking to religious leaders while he was president. and people act like, no, they all wanted it to be Christian. No, that's not what was said at all. Anyway, yeah. Let's see if see, I didn't really look at this particular article, so, but yeah, since John Roberts was confirmed as Chief Justice, he has ruled in favor of religious groups 83% of the time, chipping away at the wall of separation envisioned by Thomas Jefferson. You know, who helped introduce many of the ideas into the Constitution. He was not the primary author of the Constitution. He was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. But, like other ideas were also proposed to him when writing the Declaration of Independence, he offered ideas when, was it Madison? Madison wrote the Constitution. I believe it was Madison. Anyway, I know it's either Madison or Monroe, but I really believe it's Madison. Anyway, yeah, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the striking down of a long-standing New York City gun law have received most of the attention at the close of this year's Supreme Court, but many court watchers are equally focused on recent decisions about the separation of church and state. On June the 27th, 2022, in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, the court ruled that the public high school football coach in the state of Washington was within his rights to hold prayers at midfield after games. Since the pivotal 1962 decision in Angle versus Vitale, the court has routinely struck down school-sponsored prayers, no matter how ingeniously school districts try to make them voluntary, ecumenical, or silent. That 1962 case was just one of a series of cases that involved religious expression in the public square. In Abington School District versus Shemp, in 1963, the court ruled that mandatory Bible reading in America's public schools was unconstitutional. So yeah, I've already made a video on precedent being tossed out the window by the Supreme Court, and this is just further proof. They tossed out the window the precedent of Roe v. Wade, and they're also giving examples here of even older precedents just being tossed out the window by the Supreme Court. They don't care about precedent. It's all about political angle for them. It's not about doing what is usually understood to be what the founding fathers wanted. No, now it's our political ideation. We think you should fucking bow to us, so suck our dick. That's essentially what's going on. That's why I refuse to call them a Supreme Court. They're not. They're a gaggle of monkeys, a kangaroo court. You know, right now we need the Benny Hill music. You know, cue the music and have them running around like the morons they fucking are real fast. Because every last one of the conservative dumb fucks, yeah, even many of the liberal justices, the three that there are, you can't always depend on. But especially with six dumb fuckers, conservatives, yeah, it's they've completely destroyed any respect, any reverence that there used to be for the court, because they want to push their political agenda. But anyway, church and state. On June the 21st, 2022, court struck down the main law that prohibited tax dollars from funding tuition at religious schools. Maine provided public support to private schools in rural areas so long as those schools were non-sectarian. In Carson versus Macon, the court sided with Christian families who insist that providing public support to some private schools but not others, i.e., Christian schools, violated their right to free exercise of their religious faith. And no, it don't. They're not prevented from being Christians. They're not prevented from going to church. They're not prevented from praying. It just says the state-run schools or funded schools by the state, we have no right to push a religious ideation. But there are some religious fanatics, some cultists, some lunatics who think everybody should have to follow their religious beliefs. And no. What makes you think your religious beliefs are the top? How about fucking Islam? How about Judaism? How about Hinduism? How about Sufism? How about fucking Zoroastrianism? How about fucking Norse mythology, Greek mythology, whatever? Christianity is not the end-all be-all of everything, even though you may believe it is. Others don't. And there you are impinging on the rights of others to believe what they believe freely and fairly, because you think they should still be forced to know your stuff. No. That's the difference. You won't stay out of religion, but you want religion in state. You're not wanting a separation of church and state, as our founding fathers suggested. But the thing is, you can't have one interfering in the other and then the opposite on the other side, just because you believe the one should be ultimate. Even religious individuals believed there should be a separation of the two in early America. go back here. The separation of church and state is a philosophical and jurisprudential concept for defining political distance in the relationship between religious organizations and the state. Conceptually, the term refers to the separation or the creation of a secular state with or without legally explicit church-state separation, and to disestablishment, the changing of an existing formal relationship between the church and state. The concept originated among early Baptists in America in 1644. Roger Williams, a Puritan minister and founder of the state of Rhode Island and the First Baptist Church in America, was the first public official to call for a wall or hedge of separation between the wilderness of the world and the garden of the church. Although the concept is older, the exact phrase separation of church and state is derived from wall of separation between church and state, a term coined by Thomas Jefferson in his 1802 letter to the members of the Danbury Baptist Association in the state of Connecticut. The concept was promoted by Enlightenment philosophers such as John Locke. So yes, 1802, Jefferson is a fairly new president, because I think he takes office in like 1801. Now, he tells the Danbury Baptist Association of Connecticut, there must be a separation of church and state so that the two never mix. Sort of what he said in the letter. I can't remember the exact wording, but yeah. He felt it was better to keep the two separate so they do not impinge on each other and thus anybody's rights. But there are too many religious fanatics right now who want to destroy that idea. In a society, the degree of political separation between the church and the civil state is determined by the legal structures and prevalent legal views that define the proper relationship between organized religion and the state. The arm's length principle proposes a relationship wherein the two political entities interact as organizations, each independent of the authority of the other. The strict application of the secular principle of laicite, or laicite, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, is used in France, while secular societies such as Denmark and England maintain a form of constitutional recognition of an official state religion. So yeah, remember, in England, There is the Church of England. It's why there was such a bloody point in history where you had the Church of England and its followers, uh, uh, and between them and the Catholic Church. So, because the Catholic Pope, the Catholic Church would not grant Henry VIII, Henry VIII's request for a divorce, he proceeded to say, we don't believe in the Catholic Church, we have what's called the Church of England. And we end up seeing years and years of religious violence. You know, the immediate successor to Henry VIII was his daughter Elizabeth I to rule England. I think another one of his daughters, Mary, became Mary, Queen of Scots, the head of Scotland. And even though they were half sisters, they went to war with each other over religious ideations. Because Mary still believed in the Catholic Church, Elizabeth did not. Yeah. A lot of it stems from that point in history. Because that was... Henry VIII was late 1500s into the early 1600s, because I remember the big thing with Elizabeth, 1607 was the Spanish Armada, where they kind of just went crumple under a sudden gust of hurricane like storms. Yeah. So we're looking at that point in time, late 1500s, early 1600s. That's where a lot of this stems from. Because that religious violence, said, hey, you must have some form of religious ideation as a country. The founding fathers, they were like, we don't like that idea. Not everybody believes the same. Some of the founding fathers were deeply devout, deeply religious. Others, they had different ideas on religion. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin who was a deist. He's like, there's some kind of omnipotent or omniscient power, maybe. I don't know if it's a god. We don't know. But, surely there's something. It was just like, I can't tell you what. Jefferson would have a personal Bible where he would remove all of the miracles. He just thought, no, we don't need such things. We need some level of true guidance, not fairy tales. But the philosophy of the separation of church and state, of the church from the civil state, parallels the principle or the philosophies of secularism, disestablishmentarianism, religious liberty, and religious pluralism. By the way of these philosophies, the European states assumed some of the social roles of the church in form of the welfare state, a social shift that produced a culturally secular population and public sphere. In practice, church-state separation varies from total separation mandated by the country's political constitution, as in India and Singapore, to a state religion, as in the Maldives. So, again, religious pluralism. You know there's going to be other religious ideations, religious beliefs. And the founding fathers are like, people should have the right to follow their beliefs, their ideas. It just shouldn't run the country, though. So, in essence, we have, you stay there, we'll stay over here and do our job to run the country. But, unfortunately, religion is like, you need to do this. How about a little bit of this? A little bit of this? And that's essentially what's happening right now. It's, yeah. It's ridiculous. And that these religious fanatics are trying to proclaim, oh, it's what the founding fathers wanted. No. No, they didn't. They did not want such a thing. But yeah. The precise origin of the term itself dates to Jefferson and his correspondence with religious denominations. However, the entanglement of religion and government with government and the state dates back to antiquity, when state and religion were often closely associated with one another. And that's what the founding fathers wanted to prevent. So yeah, it talks about the different combinations. Reformation. In the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther articulated the doctrines of the two kingdoms. According to James Madison, perhaps one of the most important modern proponents of the separation of church and state, Luther's doctrine of the two kingdoms marked the beginning of the modern conception of separation of church and state. And the doctrine of two kingdoms is a Protestant Christian doctrine that teaches that God is the ruler of the whole world and that he rules in two ways. The doctrine is held by Lutherans and represents the view of some Reformed Christians. John Calvin, significantly modified Luther's original two kingdoms doctrine, and certain neo-Calvinists have adopted a different view known as the transformationalism. The two kingdoms doctrine is held in Anabaptism, that which teaches that there exist two kingdoms on earth that do not share communion with one another. The doctrine states that while people of the kingdom of this world use weapons to fight one another, those of the kingdom of Christ should strive to follow Jesus. And thus, there should be, a setup between the two. But yeah. Now, those of the Radical Reformation, the Anabaptists, took Luther's ideas in new directions, most notably in the writings of Michael Sattler, 1490 to 1527, who agreed with Luther that there were two kingdoms, but differed in arguing that these two kingdoms should be separate, and hence baptized believers should not vote, serve in public office, or participate in any other way with the kingdom of the world. While there was a diversity of views in the early days of the Radical Reformation, in time Sattler's perspective became the normative position for most Anabaptists in the coming centuries. Anabaptists came to teach that religion should never be compelled by state power, approaching the issue of church-state relations primarily from the position of protecting the church from the state. So yeah. Okay, here's the Henry VIII issue. 1534, Henry VIII, angered by Pope Clement VII's refusal to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, decided to break with the church. The Catholic Church is who they were, and set himself as ruler of the Church of England, unifying the feudal, clerical, and crown hierarchies under a single monarchy. So yeah, that's where England and the church were kind of intertwined. Now, with periodic intermission under Mary, Oliver Cromwell, and James II, the monarchs of Great Britain have retained ecclesiastical authority in the Church of England since 1534, having the current title Supreme Governor of the Church of England. The 1654 settlement under Oliver Cromwell's Commonwealth of England temporarily replaced bishops with clerical courts, with a commission of triers and juries of ejectors to appoint and punish clergy in the English Commonwealth, later extended to cover Scotland. Penal laws requiring ministers and public officials to swear oaths and follow the established faith were disenfranchised, fined, imprisoned, or executed for not conforming. So again, we have this conflict of religious ideations and the state. Thus, were many of the issues and why many of the founding fathers sought a separation of church and state. Now, Jefferson and the Bill of Rights. In English, the exact term is an offshoot of the phrase wall of separation between church and state, as written in Thomas Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Association in 1802. In that letter referencing the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Jefferson writes, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act on the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." So, we have no religion. We want to be a national religion and a level government where you don't have to believe a certain way to be a citizen. And that's the point. But there are too many Christian fanatics who are wanting to undo that idea. Make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So there should be no law that says this is our national religion. I mean, that's explicitly in there. No national religion. But the right for people to practice or exercise their beliefs of their religions should also not be infringed upon, as long as they don't infringe upon the rights of others. When you start infringing upon the rights of others, you've hit kind of a wall there, because you're making an issue that affects other people. And that's not what the Founding Fathers were seeking to do. You have the right to exercise your belief in your religion, to pray, to follow, to go to your houses of worship. But the government itself should have no pull in religion, and thus all houses of government and state should not have a form of required religion. So again, that's where the idea comes from. But again, as I've said, there's fanatics who are like, no, you should learn our religion. You should have to follow it. And it's like, no, that's not what the Constitution says. Go back and read. But yeah, Jefferson was describing to the Baptists that the U.S. Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, prevents the establishment of a national church, and in doing so, they did not have to fear government interference in their right to expressions of religious conscience. The Bill of Rights, adopted in 1791 as 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, was one of the earliest political expressions against the political establishment of religion. Others were the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, also authored by Jefferson and adopted by Virginia in 1786, and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen of 1789. So yeah, the metaphor, a wall of separation between church and state, used by Jefferson in the above quoted letter, became a part of the First Amendment's jurisprudence of the U.S. Supreme Court. So yeah, that becomes the understood idea of what it means. But as I've already discussed, this circus of monkeys, the U.S. Supreme Circus of Monkeys, don't care about precedent anymore. They're tossing them out the window. They don't care. They're all about pushing their political agenda. And that's what scares me more than anything. They'll toss anything out the window, even the Constitution, if it does not serve their purpose. They are a rogue, supreme circus of monkeys. But yeah. But I've already made this a long video. We'll go ahead and end this here. I just wanted to talk about how there is supposed to be this separation. You know, your commandments, your biblical teachings should not be a part of public education, public government. But they think otherwise. You know, they're more or less the Christian Taliban, the Christian ISIS, if you will. Because they're extremists and they think their ideation should be followed no matter what. And they're just wrong. But yeah. Again, we'll end this episode here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing. Ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.